Hello everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. During the webinar, feel free to type any questions into the chat area of the GoToWebinar dialog box, and we'll field those at the end. Is your information controlled, secured, and optimized under the current information governance initiatives? Today's program will focus on taxonomy and metadata, and we plan to provide you with information and tools to answer that question. My name is Jonathan King. I'm the Global Sales Director with FileTrail, although I've worn several hats with the company from marketing to project management, support, implementation, and development testing. I've been involved with the information management industry for about 10 years now, and I think I can provide a unique perspective into how we can help grow the value of your ECM program within your organization. So I'll be showing a brief demo of our software at the end of the presentation. The real meat of the presentation will be given by Ilona Cody. Ilona has 20+ years experience with the information industry, implementing multi-million-dollar EDMS systems with large organizations, and also has extensive knowledge and experience in privacy, technology, and security-related issues, as well as formal project management training. So thank you again for attending the webinar, and with that, Ilona, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks for everyone for listening here. So we're going to go over a few aspects here of information governance, taxonomy, and metadata. So for some of you that are really used to this, bear with us a little bit in the beginning, as we have some professionals with us today that are new to this field and are still catching up on the basics. So we will take a look at all those things today. Well, what is information governance? I'm sure that all of you have heard this term recently in the past few years. Well, it depends on who you ask, and you can see FileTrail's definition of what information governance is: control around compliance, policy, security, risk, and having control over your data. But the history here is in about 2007, Gartner Consulting decided that traditional records management just wasn't enough anymore. So they wanted to do something a little bit different, and they came up with a more robust term. So a lot of you records managers who had been doing more over all these years, you suddenly had a new definition and a new role of what you were encompassing. But one of the things that's really amazing is the statistic that if half of the Fortune 1000 companies were to improve their data by about 10%, their annual profits would collectively increase to over $2 billion. So imagine if you're a smaller organization, the benefits that you can do with taking your data and really maximizing its value. Well, the wheel here, and you might have all seen this on this slide here. This is what's known as the IGRM, the Information Governance Reference Model, and it was created by a group of lawyers and a group called the eDiscovery Reference Model. So what they did was they decided to take a look at what information governance was and see where the core pillars are. And those pillars are business, privacy and security, IT, legal, and the ECM component here as well. So this shows you what information really is, because how many of us in the organization that do work with information and data have always said, well, if more departments collectively work together, couldn't we do something to really maximize that value? And they did. So don't be surprised if you were starting in records and are now doing privacy, security, and even giving legal components to it, because that's what information governance is. It's the overlap. I've been doing this now for over 20 years, and I will be the first to tell you that there's still so much more to learn and so much great ways to advance in this field. So what is ECM, and how does it tie into information governance? Well, here's another bit of a history lesson. So ECM is electronic content management. But in the 1990s, when these systems started coming out, they were called ERMs, which are electronic records management systems. And in that capacity, that's really exactly what they were. They were these information systems that you could really only use to make a notation. So if you had a box in storage or a file, you would take that, put this into an ancient desktop computer, and you would sit there and you would be able to recall just a few keywords. Now, in the late 90s, early 2000s, something that was known as an EDMS, an electronic document management system, became very popular amongst various vendors. And what was really transformational about that was rather than just a note to say where a record was, you were actually able to attach a record in full text. So the electronic copy would be attached to that record, and you could search on that and bring it up full text in the system. Well, 10 more years go by, and sure enough, advances in technology came out, and we had what was born as the ECM, the Electronic Content Management System. And why did we change that name? Well, because it's not just about records and documents anymore. Now it's about images, music, videos, voicemails, text messages, and of course web pages and all that social media capacity that comes with that. And ECMs can certainly help you manage that. Well, how do we know why we need an ECM? Well, there comes a point in time within your organization where you have all this data and you don't know what to do with it. Well, I'm not going to read all these boxes on the slide here, but at the same time, business drivers for your organization will vary depending on the type of company you are, depending on what your ultimate goals are, but typically, all of these business drivers you will touch on at one point in time. If you're based in North America, sure, your litigation capacity is going to be higher than if you were in other parts of the world. But at the same time, everyone can benefit from improved business processes, trying to automate some of this. You obviously want privacy and security because you want to try to avoid data breaches, and an ECM can certainly help you with that type of capacity. So with this, if you can, this presentation will be mailed to all of you at the end, take a look at these drivers and see where you are in your organization with this, and then if there are any gaps that you certainly need to address. Now, having said all that about the ECMs, before you bring in a system and really drive forward with that, you need to take a look at your existing policies and procedures. You can spend a ton of money on the best ECM, but at the same time, you're going to need to do a little bit of people and process work internally. And these policies and procedures, they will help you and your staff understand what it is you want and at the same time what is expected of them. So if staff are doing something that they shouldn't and it's not in a policy, well then you're going to need to really adapt that policy and obtain sign-off from your staff to make sure that they comply. But at that same time, your organization should be training your staff. You should be doing training sessions. You could do webinars, for example, very briefly in your organization on what your information policies are. But just make sure that they understand what the expectations are and the goals. Now, at the same time, to help you with these policies, you may want to form a steering committee to help you advise on what the desired outcome is, and to also have involvement and buy-in from these senior executives, because that will really help you drive your information program forward. Just remember, try to keep the stakeholders to a smaller group, ideally no more than 5, but try to get some of the key players, legal, IT, compliance, and so forth. At the same time, some of the policies that you might want to look at if your organization does not already have these are like BYOD policies, so bring your own device, the social media policy, records retention schedule, the records policy, privacy, and security. All right, that brings us to taxonomy. And taxonomy is certainly one of the core foundations and one of the things that FileTrail really emphasizes here. Now, a good taxonomy can really benefit your organization. But what is a taxonomy? Well, as you can see here, the textbook definition is a branch of science concerned with classification, especially of organisms and systematics. Well, that's more the scientific side, but at the same time, classification is very, very important in building a good ECM program. Now, it's really just about taking information and taking something from a larger capacity, so you have the entire universe, and moving it into more manageable chunks of data. So you start with very broad categories and then work your way downward. So you will have a hierarchy, you will have ownership that's further defined through that filing structure. There's comprehension and transparency because you're now sharing data. And at the same time with the taxonomy, it's scalable throughout your enterprise. Now, these are some of the most obvious examples. For taxonomy, you will remember this from elementary school, right? You have your phylum, your class, your species, and then you go, again, broader to narrow. But if you take a look here on screen, and you will certainly see when you have the filing structure, right? You with your folders that a lot of you are accustomed to, it's very similar, and it's really taking that static paper-based system that you've been working with through all these years and automating it to have a virtual filing cabinet in many ways. Now, there's a lot of benefits in using a taxonomy. So you've probably heard, with the file plan and the corporate culture, yes, you do need to take some time in planning, and this is it can take from a couple months to to really get a good structure in place. And it's important that you have some of these components here when you build the system. But rather than having your documents just randomly entered into the system, you can create a logical order if you take the time to build a taxonomy. So remember, in an organization, it's not just about you anymore. It's about the enterprise and having other people find the same data that you are looking for. Like, how would someone find that document? So think of it when you have a logical order. So remember librarians and Dewey, and if you go to a librarian pretty much anywhere in the world and tell them a specific subject to find, they will bring that back because it's a standardized classification system, and that's what we're trying to achieve here with the filing structure. Now, another key aspect is provenance. So with files, rather than just putting information into a system randomly, you have the provenance capacity, which is a term from the archival world, and it means the relation of documents in addition to the core document that you have. So if you are suddenly looking for things that are related, you can almost gain additional information from those surrounding documents that might give you more insights into what you're looking forward to already. Inheritance. One of the best things about an ECM and the ability to use folder structures there is that it has the ability to inherit downward. And with that downward inheritance, it means that you can build special permissions, you can build metadata that we'll get into later, and it will all cascade downward just by creating a subfolder or by placing a document or an item into that folder, which can save you a lot of time and effort. With the same capacity is records retention. The records retention is also applied at the folder level. It's so much more manageable, and any document that you put into a specific folder will inherit that retention automatically if you've chosen to set the system up. In that same term, access permission. So assigning role groups and security within that folder, if you have a folder designed a certain way, only those people that have been granted permission to see that material will actually see that. So this is something that's really great, and the security is fantastic, and FileTrail has done a fantastic job to make sure that that is enforced. Well, how do you go about and build a taxonomy? So me being a librarian, it's pretty easy for me to build a taxonomy because I've just been doing it for so long. But for the rest of you, this might be something that's a little bit newer. It's something that is still really an amazing experience when you build that taxonomy and you watch that folder structure come together to see how your organization works. And for every organization, it's a little bit different, and there's slightly different terms. But one of the keys is that your taxonomy should be manageable. Don't think that it's something that you need to do that's excessive. So you need to really go out, you need to ask people, you need to certainly do your interviews and find out where people store information, what do they call it, how do they use it, how would they like to use it in the future. So that's something that is really, really clear and worthwhile. Now, you need to, at the same time, think of the bigger picture, right? When you do that, you're going to need to be very specific at this. It's at the enterprise level anymore. Don't think that you're building this specifically for the department. Think of how the information will transcend across the entire organization so that you can retrieve it easier later on. Now, one of the capacities here is that you also want to keep your data at what is known at a functional level. So unless you're a large governmental organization where you do have these separate departments and bodies, your information is now functional. And the reason why is how many of you have reworked. There's so many reorganizations that occur that you need to essentially revise that, because you are going to spend more time reclassifying your data if you have something very, very detailed versus if you have your functions such as legal, human resources, operations, facilities. Those make sense, and regardless of what you decide to call your groups in the future, that logical classification should not change. Now, we have something in addition to that too, is when you have that manageable type of taxonomy, you're going to need to take that and keep it as high level as possible. I had a client once that had 33 files in their structure, 33 layers of folders and documents. At the end, they couldn't even open their documents anymore because what happened was they hit on the 256 characters and the system that they were using just kicked it back. So we had to go through, restructure their data, and try to make it so much more manageable. Well, what happened with that is that you need to keep it to about 5 layers when you're building your initial taxonomy, and in the long run when your end users have some insight and some impact, really try not to make it more than 7 to 10 layers deep, because anything further than that is just going to create a lot of chaos and require unnecessary navigation. So when you do that, in addition to keeping manageable layers in your folder structure, be clear in your terms. Realize that people are going to be using this taxonomy years from now, and someone who's new to the organization will need to find that. So be very clear in your terms of use. And of course, one of the best things, as I mentioned before too, is that a taxonomy in a folder structure capacity will emulate your filing system. So as your users might be having a little bit of difficulty learning the system or just getting used to transcending paper to electronic, it's okay. Just tell them that it's a virtual representation of their filing cabinet, and they should be more accustomed and willing to change, especially for your initial deployment of the system. Now, having said all of that about a taxonomy, we now need to add metadata, and this is what I call a hybrid approach. So you need both to be successful, and the reason is that I'm going to give you a metaphor here. Think of a hybrid car, right? Sure, we had gas cars for so many years, and they worked just great, right? But at the same time, when electronic cars were introduced, they worked even better and were far more efficient with that. So they used less resources, and the capacity just improved. And that's what you have to think of when using this ECM. You, at the same time, should have a high-level folder structure, but you need metadata to really benefit the full approach. Well, what is metadata? You're probably familiar with the term by now, but we're going to look at the definition anyway. And I strongly dislike the term data about data because I don't think that that really describes what metadata is. So I have a little bit of a definition that I use, and I say it's little pieces of information behind the scenes that can help enhance search, retrieval, and reporting functionality. So you can also hear metadata referred to as tags. Essentially, metadata is no different than the library card catalogs used to be. It's just now that they're more automated and far more powerful than ever. What are the benefits of metadata? Well, there are a number of key features on why metadata is important, but one of the most important is that it can help you in your search and retrieval features. So it's not just you type something into a system. Imagine having very specific pieces of information come up and additional pieces of information that were added in by a user to make your searches a lot more responsive. With that, and building on search, you now have the ability to build a structured query. Metadata, for example, if you wanted to search by a date or by an author or by a specific status on whether a document is completed, you can do that by entering that information manual or having that automated. And again, your search capacity is going to be much more specific, and you will have the ability to do a report or a search that's very, very accurate. One of the other benefits is that you can be consistent with your terminology. In the metadata fields, you have the ability to use something known as drop-down boxes in your predefined fields. So again, how many misspellings have you had in your organization depending on a word? You know, how will we look for a company? Is it company, just Inc.? I mean, people enter information wrong all the time, but now you can actually standardize that data and have, again, very accurate results. Reporting, in my opinion, is probably the best feature of metadata because you now can take information. Again, you can put a due date, you can put an expiration date, you can have a status, and if you were managing your staff and you suddenly needed to see, take an invoice, for example, or a contract, when was something due or when was something expiring? And if you took a few seconds to enter that information right when you uploaded the document into the system or periodically changed it as you needed to, imagine on one page where you have the ability to generate a report where you can see what is due or how much is due, and you can export that into Excel, and it can really change the way that you work. Same thing with if you're managing a lot of staff. Rather than going around to them and asking them what their status is, you can have them enter it a metadata based upon certain documents in the system, and you can, again, generate the report and have that in one view. Now, views are another really great capacity. So we spent a lot of time building our folder structures, but metadata can help take out that information and generate it into a completely different view. So just because something is in a folder, when you query a database, it will take that information out of that folder and put it into a different view because it's based on these computerized tables that will report on whatever you've decided your metadata to be. So your life can be far more efficient based upon these reports and views in the system. Now, additionally, the security enhancements of the ECM and FileTrail has very good audit trails. So the audit trails are where you have the ability to see what someone has done to a document or an object in particular in the system. Have changes been made? Who accessed it? When was it accessed? So between the audit trails and the system logs, you have a very, very robust and secure information system. Well, just like our taxonomy, how do you know what you need to generate all this metadata? Well, same thing with the taxonomy, right? You need to do interviews. You need to find out what it is that your people are doing, how are they using it, right? Interview them. Try not to you know, get too into the weeds with that, but find out what the ultimate goal is and what types of reports and search parameters would your users like to search on to make their lives easier. Again, when you build this type of metadata, you want to think about the bigger picture. Think about the enterprise, right? You will certainly build metadata at document types, specifically for some of the more controlled documents and important documents to your organization. But keep in mind, other people are going to need to search for this across the enterprise as well. Now, just because you can doesn't mean you should. While you have the ability to have endless metadata fields, essentially, you don't want to do that. What you need to do is you need to have them be fairly reasonable. Find out what it is that your users would really like to search on and stick with that. Make sure that you take the time. Don't just put something in to say, oh, we'll take it out later, or, you know, we'll fill it in later. If you don't really need it, don't add it in. With some of the companies that I have seen, especially pharmaceutical, I have seen about 20 to 25 metadata fields, but that's because they're in very, very highly regulated industries, and that's something that you will need to do. But if you're just a normal, you know, business, you should have about 7 to 10 metadata fields, and that's tops. And where you can, try to have the system auto-populate as much of that as possible. So clear terminology. That's important as well. Just like we said, you know, be clear in your naming conventions. Don't make the fields very vague. Make sure that if somebody sees that, or someone who is an expert in the field as well, that they're going to know what it is that you're requiring them to enter. Try to sometimes have guidelines as well. as to, like a data dictionary as to what your fields are, but be clear in your names because, again, people are going to need to find these documents years into the future. Metadata also has, and based on the ECM, you have the ability to assign mandatory fields. And this can be a really great option, especially if you have users that don't like to enter data in the system. But for example, if you need to know a certain place, like country of operation or who the contact information is, you have the ability before a user saves something into the system to actually force the user. Otherwise, they won't be able to save the document. Now, don't make everything mandatory because sometimes you just don't know what the outcome is. So, for example, if you had total costs or an expiration date that you may not know, leave that blank and come back into it. Use the mandatory fields where you know that you need to capture that information, and it will force your users to do so in the nicest of ways possible. Of course, now we have system-generated versus user-populated data, and this is where you take the inheritance functionality a lot of time. So you can use that and use the inheritance. So for every document you put into the system, it will pre-populate with what you've set at the folder level, and that's a nice way to do that as well. Other system-generated, like date created, the author, and you can do certain things within the database as well to have that go down. But again, you want to try to limit what your users have to put into the metadata categories themselves. On the more important and regulated documents, you obviously want to have your users have a human eye look at it to make sure that it's accurate to, again, yield the best search results possible. So having gone through policies, procedures, taxonomy, and metadata, now it's time to retrieve those documents. And the way to retrieve that is through search. FileTrail has a really great search functionality, and you can use various parameters. So with the search, here is this is a section I really like because I get to talk about some of the library principles. Search can really make or break you in an organization because if you know how to run searches properly, you can find the most precise pieces of information very, very quickly. So it's key. Now, there's something within the search universe that is known as precision versus recall. And at sometimes, you may indeed want everything on a subject. That is very possible, especially if you have a very specific word that you're looking for. But when you're doing a search sometimes, you say, yeah, let me check on everything, and you suddenly have 3 million hits, you may go, that's not such a good idea. So you refine your search parameters to have more precise results, and that's something known as recall. Now, we'll remember our terms, Boolean search, right, the and or not functionality. Well, there are other parameters and other things known as like wildcard searches that can certainly help you control the search, and John will get into that later in the demo today. But you also want to remember that in addition to the Boolean search, the keywords are very important. Again, you go from a very wide universe to a very specific search, and knowing how to use these keywords are key. And then that's why your metadata is so important too, because in addition to possible words that are in the document or in the object, you can use that metadata to further refine your searches. Full text is one of the best things about an ECM. The robust ECM systems have the ability to take your documents, because those words that were done from these born digital documents, right? Think of something that you created in Word and Excel. They are searchable in their entirety. But one of the things that you have to certainly keep in mind is that when using an ECM, if you took a document, printed it, think of a contract that you had signed, you scanned it in, wanted to upload it, but you didn't perform a function that was called OCR, which is optical character recognition, it won't index in the system unless you have some sort of interface that does it automatically for you. But unless you do, you need to make sure that anything that's an image, so a TIFF, a PDF, that you have gone through and OCR'd it before it goes into the system. Otherwise, the system will certainly not register that functionality for you. But these are the elements of search, and something that, again, combined with taxonomy and metadata, are going to give you extremely accurate results for your information. So change management, and we added this section in because we thought it was very important because, yes, now you have a great system, you have a great methodology, you've got your processes, but how do we actually make the system successful? And this is so important. There is a statistic from Gartner that they did a few years ago, which says that 70 to 80% of business intelligence projects fail. Well, why is that? Well, a lot of times it's because the end user was not involved in the process. And I can't stress the importance of having your end users involved in the process from start to finish. It's important to get them early on for them to participate in the design process. Do they test it? Even something as small as having them choose the color of the background or, you know, some of the names in their folder structures. It's so important because then they feel that they have some ownership of the project, and the success they will feel a part of it. So really take them on. But this is a slide here which shows the change process, and it's something that is extremely key. So always involve your end users, always ask for field feedback, and you'll find that they're very accepting and responsive to that. But how do you measure change, and how do you know that change has been successful? I'm not going to read all of these, but at the same time, you want to have realistic goals in place. Going in and saying, yes, I'm going to deploy this ECM to 200,000 people around the world, you know, in 3 months is not really a successful goal. So be very realistic, break it down into manageable chunks, and execute that. At the same time, determine what success looks like and have those built into metrics that you can measure as well. Communicate clearly, look at what's in place for your policies and procedures, train your staff, again, in very clear and easy to understand documentation and our programs. And look at what is going to create value. Try to automate what you can to make your staff's lives easier. Yes, we know there'll be a little more work up front when you have to train on the system and learn the new process, but afterwards show them the value that an ECM can bring to them and how it can make their lives much, much easier by finding information, spending less time searching for data, reporting options, and so forth. And again, we talked about engaging users, but be honest through the whole process. Always tell them what's happening. If the project falls behind a little bit, don't hesitate to ask for their help and for their insight and say, hey, we really need all of us to work together to bring this project forward. All right, so that brings us to the end of the info portion, but let's take a recap on what we learned today. So today we looked at what the definition of information governance is, as well as electronic content management. We took business drivers, analyzed those. We mentioned the importance of policies and procedures. We looked at how taxonomy and metadata can affect an ECM and how important it is, and the steps to take for the benefits, and how to start your own taxonomy and metadata builds within your organization. And then we explained why the hybrid approach was important and how a taxonomy and metadata work hand in hand to create a very, very successful structure for your ECM. It's a core foundation with both of those combined. We also took a look at search and how the search functionality was just as important so that you could retrieve what you put into the system. And then we talked briefly about change management and the importance of your users and the engagement. So I hope that you found this session helpful. I am now going to turn this over to John, who's going to give you a bit of insight on how FileTrail actually works. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ilona. Thanks for that very informative presentation. So I'm going to try to keep my part short. I have a couple of slides here, and I try not to read what's on the slide when doing these presentations, but I just want to list a few of the key values that we've heard customers tell us that our solution provides. So we believe that in today's competitive markets, using legacy systems to manage information doesn't provide the flexibility that your organization needs. When your critical business documents are managed correctly, they deliver the highest value to the organization, leading to increased profits, lowered operating costs and overhead, and reduced risk. So visibility into all of that information increases the value that that information provides. So depending on the type of company that we're working with, whether it's focused on growth or value, our system was designed to grow and change with the organization. So detailed changes to the system that would typically require customization in other software systems, it can be done on the fly with point-and-click configuration in FileTrail. So this is key to many organizations because their decision is ultimately going to affect how much time and money they spend deploying this type of system to other areas of the business. Now these factors really help lower the total cost of ownership. So because of the flexible configuration and quick user adoption, we're able to deploy the system quickly, typically within 8 to 12 weeks. So that's only possible with our streamlined project methodology where we can get you up and running quickly and start realizing a return right away. So here are the basics of what we'll see in the demo. Since our inception, our development has focused on the #1 priority of being easy to use. So you'll see that the system is immediately familiar. We use internet concepts like a global search or shopping cart that makes the kickoff of workflows like shopping online. This is important because it ensures a high user adoption rate from the end users, your knowledge workers, and you immediately realize an ROI through the enhanced visibility and efficiency. The features that allow you to mitigate risk come from our retention tool. So we've reimagined what retention and compliance should look like, which automates your lifecycle compliance processes. This is modern technology, not just a redo of old processes, and the retention features allow us to help reduce risk. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the demo site now. So we're just going to take a look at a high-level demo. For a more detailed demo or a customized demo for your application, you can contact us directly, and we'll post that contact information at the end of the webinar. So we're starting from the Create tab. This is where the life of a record begins. And this gives us a good opportunity to talk about how the taxonomy is built in. So at the top here, we have organization, category, and media. So this is, again, it's a good place to start because it's a foundation for deploying information governance strategies within your organization. So your taxonomy is built in here, and the organization is who owns it or what department or area it comes from. You can see we have those general organizations. There's corporate, legal, human resources, and tax, and like Ilona said, keeping it simple here. The category defines the type of content that will be created by that functional area. So you can see for corporate legal, we have a few different options here. If I switch to HR, it changes the type of content that you may create. And so I'm going to change back to the corporate legal. And then the media defines what it is that you're actually creating, whether that's an electronic file or maybe it's a physical record, and it can be any sorts of different content, and we track lots of different things with clients. So your taxonomy is the structure in which you hang your metadata and rights management. Now I'm signed in as an administrator, so we have a full view. But the end users will have permissions in the system based on their functional group, the content they create, and what information they should be able to see. So the taxonomy also defines what metadata will be captured, which structures your data to make it easier to find and manage so that you have full visibility into your critical information. So you can see as I change the metadata, or as I change the category, it updates the metadata that you would enter in here. You can also see it's automatically classifying this record with your retention policy. So that now says leases, but if I change this back to litigation, here we have different fields to fill out for that type of content. And a different record series or a different policy that's going to get applied. Now, there are a number of ways to get data into the system. This can be done by importing existing records through our administrator's utility, our administrator's import utility. You can save directly from Office products. So if I'm pulling over a Word document here, and you see there's this Save to FileTrail section. So you can save directly from Office products with our Office integration. And then you can also drag and drop onto the target that you see here on screen. Now, one key thing that you want to look at when looking into a system like this is really how you work with batches of information, because this is a question that we always get with clients. They're not just creating 1 or 2 documents at a time. They usually have a full set of information that they want to bring into the system all at one time in regards to what they're creating. So I have a folder here with some demo data, and I'm going to enter in the metadata for this item. Okay, AccuMed. And we'll say that the matter open is today. And so now that I have the metadata in here, I want to assign this metadata to 3 different documents that I'm importing, that I'm bringing in. So I'm going to take the 2 exhibits and then also the final document, which I've turned into a PDF, because I've made that the final record, and I'm going to drag those into this drop area. So we can see with the green dot that these have been uploaded, and now I can save this. And so here, if we look in my creation card on the left-hand side, here's the 2 Word documents and then the one PDF that have been created. Now that we've brought these in, we have all the metadata that's been applied to all 3 of those, and I can make a few edits here, and we'll say that this one specifically was Exhibit B, and I can go ahead and save that. Now, depending on your industry and regulatory auditing requirements, whenever you make changes to the data in the system, you may have different requirements for validating transactions. So we have this e-signature tool here where you can capture a reason for that change and add in your e-signature. And so, again, a system like this is going to make sure all the changes in the system, any location changes or any updates to the system, are fully auditable with a version history. Our system in particular captures the audit trail for individual fields as well. So I'm going to make the change for that document. I'm going to say that this one is Exhibit A. Okay. And then now that we have our data in, we've created these records, now we can go ahead and search. Now again, we're focused on making this as easy to use for the end users as possible. And a lot of users these days who are familiar with internet tools, they want a quick, easy search that they can do at any time. So if they get a phone call or someone walks into their office, they need to look for something quickly, they can quickly go to a search, like we have our global search up here at the top, and do a Google or full text type search that searches among all the information. So I'm going to put in a partial word here. And so I put in ACCU, which brings back AccuMed, AccuJet, AccuSpence, all the AccuSystems. So a few different things that start with ACCU. And you can see here's the 3 items that were just created. We have the PDF, the Word documents, and there's also some physical items that are related to this. So here's a physical file that's checked out to Vincent. Here's another one that's checked out to Sue. Here's another file that's currently in a box on row A, section 3, shelf B in the archive storage. So the system manages any number of locations, whether they're physical or electronic, and it manages all your content so that you're able to find it within one place. In addition, as we mentioned, any changes to the system should be fully auditable. So for the electronic records, you're able to check those out, make changes, and check them back in. I have a record here that's already had that done, and the system will keep track of your version control or version changes. So you can see there was the first version that was entered into the system, and then they made a minor change and uploaded that back in to version 1.1, and then there was a major change to version 2. So the system has that flexibility as well. And you can also see that on many of these screens, there's this download button. So if you need to capture any of that information into a report, you want to make sure that the system that you select has the ability to easily download that information to Excel or CSV from there. You can also see once you have your search results, I could download these to CSV, Excel, or PDF all from the screen. Now, last part, while we're on this screen, we also want to make it very easy to perform functions on items. So we use the concept of the search cart. Basically, anybody who's gone shopping online pretty much gets that. If you wanted to request a physical item to be delivered to you, you could just add those items to your cart and then go into your cart and hit request. But another important part of this is if you're an administrator, a question that we get all the time is as items are going through their life cycle, how can I put a batch of items on hold? Well, by creating your taxonomy and using metadata, you can define your searches. And so here we can have any number of searches in the system. You can have any number of metadata fields here to filter through your data. And so many times when you're placing things on hold, you have very specific criteria that you need to put in to find those items. So if I wanted to say, everything with the Acumed matter name needs to be placed on hold, I already put one of those in my cart. I can add all of these to my cart. I'm going to deselect the AccuJet that I added there earlier. I can add these all to hold from here. And whether this is a hold for an audit or hold for litigation, or if you need to create a new hold, those can all be created from here. You can see one of them has an existing hold on it, so you could have multiple holds placed on an item. So you have a lot of flexibility in your holds management. Now, as items are approaching the end of their life cycle, you're going to want to be able to do a search to see what's eligible for destruction. And so we're able to do that here, and it can show you the date to destroy and if there's any holds on those items. But like I mentioned before, we really reimagined what retention and disposition should look like. So we're going to be doing another webinar later on that goes a little deeper into this, but very briefly, when the items are approaching their disposition, the reviewers will receive email notifications to let them know that they have items that need to be reviewed. That will bring them into this dashboard where they can see the items, they can request the items that they need, they can view the information they need to make their decision, they can review items that are currently on hold, or they can place items on hold if they determine that the item is not eligible for disposition. But most importantly, they can mark items as reviewed right within this dashboard. And because we're now capturing it within a dashboard, the records manager or the person in charge of your information governance policies, they're able to monitor that review as it's going on to see who's been doing their work and who they need to follow up with to make sure that it gets done on time. So again, we wanted to keep this at a high level and keep it short. So from here, we're just going to open up to questions and find out, what else, any questions about the part that Ilona gave, or any questions about the software. We're open to questions from here. Okay, so the first question that I have here is for Ilona. It says, what do I do if I'm having difficulty incorporating a folder subject into my taxonomy?
Sure. So that's a great question, and there's a saying within the classification world that classification is as much of an art as it is a science. So you do have the benefit within your taxonomy to put things that work best. So within your organization, you can customize your own taxonomy. So if you find that something isn't working in one area and you want to move it into a different portion of the hierarchy, go ahead and do so. As long as you find that it's very logical and that your users can find it, you can just move things around to meet the needs of your organization. So ask your users what it is that they're trying to classify, break that down into smaller pieces, make sure that your terms are as simple as possible, and then move it to where it works best.
Okay, sounds good. That makes a lot of sense. Let's see, and there's another question here. It's kind of a follow-up too. So this person says, I've tried working with folder structures before, but sometimes there are too many documents in the folders, and I still have difficulty finding what I'm looking for. So is there anything I can do to fix this?
Absolutely. So what you have to remember about a taxonomy is a living structure. Just because you created something 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or yesterday doesn't mean that you can't take the time to look at and reevaluate your business needs. So your taxonomy should be constantly changing as the needs of your business grows and evolves. What you need to do is you need to take what you have, and I'm assuming that there's probably hundreds of documents in a folder, or at least 50, because that's when I know that classification starts to get a little more challenging, and when you try to find that. But once you've realized like how many documents are in that folder, take your higher level folders and see if you can break them into subfolders to really address those housing needs. So take the like documents, classify them together. Obviously, if you have documents that have serial numbers or other similar characters, you can have more of those in a folder, especially if they share a very similar naming convention. But otherwise, look at your high-level folders, break them down into more logical subfolders, and reclassify. But certainly don't be afraid to go back and change the terms of your taxonomy, change the layers within it. Again, don't go too deep, but take a look every 6 months or every year for sure, and make sure that what you are calling things and how your taxonomy is structured actually meets the way that your organization still works.
Okay, sounds good. I have another question here. This one's specifically about FileTrail, so I can take this one. And it's asking, what are FileTrail's reporting capabilities? Well, as we showed in the demo, FileTrail has, you can have unlimited user-defined fields, so you can create any number of fields for your metadata. And so capturing all that data is the important part, that there's somewhere in the database where you're capturing all of the data that you need to identify your records, and it's also capturing all the transactional information like your history and audit trails, and all of that as well. So in terms of reporting, what we've done is we've exposed this database in the search tool so that you can, just by editing a search, you can define your search criteria so that it's as broad, or as your criteria is as broad or as granular as you want it to be. And then we've also opened up the search results so you can define any number of fields as your search results fields. So with our search, you can literally pull out any data from the database, and then once you have those results, you can download those to CSV, Excel, or PDF to create your reports. So 95% of the reports that our clients create are done through the search tool. Now, there are situations where you want more managerial or transactional type reports, like user activity or activity based on a storage area. So we do have a reports tab where you can have reports like that, and we have some canned reports in there, and file room activity and things like that. Also, we have a data warehouse where you can report directly to the database, and so we have clients that are using things like Crystal reports or SQL reporting services, where they can easily report directly to the database, and we can add those reports under the Reports tab. And the next question I have here, and this one is also for Ilona. My teammate insists that we need a particular metadata field to run a search on. I think this field is excessive. What can I do to convince them that I'm right?
That's funny. Well, I'm hoping that that they will certainly believe you after you give them this response. But yeah, sometimes it happens where organizations will try to put in all of these fields all at once. And I'm hoping that you're still in the early phases of designing the system, or at least trying to identify what some of your metadata requirements are. So if you're in those early phases, what I suggest is that you do some testing for one, see how it looks on screen, and then you do your UAT, which is your user acceptance testing, to see how your users feel, and do they really think that it's necessary. Otherwise, if you're later on in the stages, you can certainly do a poll, especially for those users that are being affected by being asked to enter in this additional data. Additionally, what you can do is you can do a small sampling of documents, see how many are put in, see if they're filled out. You can run a search based on those fields afterwards to see if it really makes a difference in the retrieval capacity. And if you find it doesn't work, tell your teammates, say, hey, okay, we will try this, but if we find that it's not working after 3 months, we're going to remove it to prevent our coworkers from having to enter in all of this unnecessary information. Good luck, though.
Oh, all right. Sounds good. Well, that's all the time that we have. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. If you missed any part of this, or if you'd like to pass this on to anyone else, we'd like you to as well. We'll be posting the webinar on our YouTube page, and we're also going to be sending the link to the entire registration list for the webinar so that you're able to pass that on. But again, thank you, everyone, and thank you for your time. Okay, and thank you, Ilona.